Okay, so we're going to be looking at adding and subtracting with positives and negatives. You have been practicing this on Edgenuity, but we're going to do a straight up lesson with it to give you some more practice, because it is a very large skill for 7th grade and 8th grade and going forward as well. So the first thing I want to do is look at the steps. It's probably going to confuse you when you read it to begin with, but the more practice we do, the more it'll make sense. So first step, if you have two signs next to each other, make it one sign. Two negatives will make a positive, and we've already talked about that in 6th grade. A negative and a positive turns into a negative, a positive and a negative turns into a negative. So basically, if the signs, two negatives make a positive, and then if you only have one negative, it's going to stay negative. Kind of similar to when we were multiplying and dividing, but with multiplying and dividing, the signs didn't have to be next to each other to change it, and with these, the signs do need to be next to each other. So once you get rid of, if there's two signs next to each other, changing it, then you go to the second step. If values have the same sign, you will add and keep the sign. If there's different signs, you subtract the smaller digit from the bigger digit and keep the sign of the bigger digit. Again, let's get started and it'll make a lot more sense. So our first example we're going to do is going to be, hold on one second. Oops, sorry about that. It's going to be (4 plus negative 3). Okay. Now, a lot of times you'll see these parentheses. The parentheses don't let it throw you off. I would still consider this plus and this negative next to each other. So since we have a plus and a negative, our first step says two signs next to each other, you got to make it one sign. So since it's just one negative, we can cross off both of them, and we're just going to keep it as a negative. Okay, because again, that's going back to, if you have one negative, it'll just stay negative. Now, a lot of people say, wait, I thought it was a minus. When we're dealing with positive and negative numbers, you can really think of it as a minus or a negative, however it suits you best. They're the same things, just one is an adjective, or one is would be like a verb, and one would be a descriptor, an adjective, so you really can think of it as either way. So I'm going to turn it, now I'm going to think of it as a minus, because that makes more sense. This is something you're used to solving, so no need to even look at the second step. Since it's something you know how to solve, let's just solve it, and 4 minus 3 is 1. Okay, so that's the first example. Positive and negative, cancel them out, it makes a minus. 4 minus 3, 1. Done. Okay, let's go to the next one. Clear this off for you here. Hold on one second. And we'll go to the next one. Okay, so our next one is going to be 8 minus negative 10. It's doing my font white. Hold on, let's make it black. Okay. Let's try that again. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so two negatives next to each other. Again, two signs next to each other. We're going to cross them off. Two negatives cancel to give you a positive or a plus. You can think of it either way. So it would be 8 plus 10, which would, again, this is something we know to solve. No need to look at the second step. That will give us 18. So again, two signs next to each other. Two negatives cancel to give you an addition. 8 plus 10, 18. Done. Okay, let's go to the next one. Hopefully the more you see, the more it will make sense. And become easier and easier. Okay, next one. -4. Let me get the right color here. -4 plus parentheses -3. So the first thing we do, two signs are next to each other. Now this one's out in front. It's separated by a number, so that doesn't count. But the plus and then minus that's separated by a parentheses, that counts as together. So a plus and a minus gives you a negative. Again, when there's just one negative, it's going to stay negative or as a minus. So now what we have, keep the -4, and now we have a minus the number 3. Now we do need to look at the second step, because this is not something you're used to solving. Now since it's simple numbers, you could think of it on a number line as you start at -4 and go down 3. But we're going to follow these steps because we're going to be getting bigger and crazier numbers, so you need to have a system in place. Now it says, if the values have the same sign, this is a -4 and a -3. Again, you say, oh, well, what if it's a minus? We're going to always think of it as either, is this 3 positive or negative? Well, there's a negative sign, a minus or a negative sign out front. We're going to count that as a negative. It's almost like you could think of it as terms. Okay, if we circle from the back, you would have a, make that a little skinnier, a -3, and you have a -4. Okay, so it's almost like you can circle them as you would circle terms. So right now, do they have the same sign or different signs? Same sign, because they're both negative. So since they have the same sign, let's look at what it says over here. Okay, it says add and keep the sign. So we're going to add 4 plus 3. That would give us 7, and we keep the sign. It was negative, so it would stay negative. Okay, so we did just what the step 2 said. We added them, and we kept the sign. It was negative, so it's going to stay negative. Now that makes sense, because if you're on a number line and you're at -4, and you're thinking of it up and down, you go down 3 because it's negative, you will end up at -7. That was, it's getting a little trickier, but hopefully you're following along. Again, we do have Zoom sessions every day. If you have any questions or you're struggling, you can come, we can practice these more, or if you had a question from the video, I can answer that as well. Okay, let's go to the next one. And the next one is -8 minus 5. Okay, so step 1, if there's two signs next to each other, make it one sign. You do not have two signs next to each other, so we can skip that step. Step 2, if values have the same sign, add and keep the sign. These do have the same sign because, again, if you think of it like terms, as circling terms, you have a -5 and you have a -8. So they have the same sign, negatives. So we're going to add 8 and 5 together. That would equal 13. But we keep the sign, and the sign of both of them is negative, so it'll stay negative. So your answer would be -13. Again, if you're lost, if this is confusing, this is probably one of the more confusing lessons that we have done. Please come to a Zoom session, write your questions down, write down the example you didn't understand. I'd love to help you with it. Okay, next one, 8 minus 10. Let me make this the right color again. Okay, so do we have two signs next to each other? No. Skip step 1. Step 2. If the values have the same sign, add and keep the sign. Well, let's look. If I circle this, we have a -10. Oopsies, make it smaller. Okay. And we have an 8. Now remember, if there's no sign in front of it, is it positive or negative? It's going to be positive. So if you want to go ahead and add in a positive sign, you can. So that's really like a +8. Okay? So right now they have different signs, not the same sign. So this is the first time we've seen that, different signs. Okay? So we're going to look at where it says in step 2, if values have different signs, we're going to look at what to do now. They have different signs. subtract the smaller digit from the bigger digit, and keep the sign of the bigger one. So since one is positive and one is negative, we're going to take the bigger digit, which is 10. 10 is bigger than 8. And we're going to subtract instead of adding. So it's 10 minus 8 is 2. And we keep the sign of the bigger one. So is 10 bigger or is 8 bigger? 10 is bigger. So the answer is negative 2. So when the signs are different, subtract. 10 minus 8 is 2. And 10 was bigger, so you keep the negative sign. So negative 2. Okay, next one. We got 4 more to go over. I realize this video is a little longer, but I feel like it's needed. Okay, next one. 10 plus parentheses negative 18. Okay, when two signs are next to each other, we got to change it. So positive and negative, we're going to change it so it's just a negative. So now you're going to have 10 minus 18. Okay, now this is not something we're used to, so we're going to think of it like how we would circle terms. We have a negative 18. Oops. And the 10, since there's no sign in front of it, the sign is positive. Okay, if there's no sign, it's going to be positive. So signs are different, so we look at that one. If values have different signs, what do? Subtract. So 18 minus 10 is 8. You keep the sign of the bigger number. 18 is bigger, so it's going to be a negative 8. And that makes sense because do you have more positives or more negatives? You have more negatives. How many more negatives do you have? 8 more negatives. So the answer is negative 8. Also, if you think of it as a number line, if you started at positive 10 and went down 18, you would end at negative 8. Okay, so if you think of it conceptually, the answer does make sense. If you want extra videos and extra practice, Khan Academy is a great resource. They have tons. I have some more in this lesson that I want you to do, but there's even more there that you can watch if you're really struggling. That's an option too. Okay, negative 3 minus negative 16. Okay, so we have two negatives next to each other in the middle. Those get canceled. This is step 1. And two negatives, we know are going to make a positive. So negative 3 plus 16. Okay, so now we have to think, are the signs the same or different? Okay, it looks like the signs are different. One is positive, oopsies. One is positive, one is negative, so we're going to subtract them. 16 minus 3 is 13. And the positive one is bigger this time, so the answer is going to stay positive. Again, this answer makes sense because if you start on a number line at negative 3, go up 16, you will end at positive 13. Okay, moving on. We have 2 more, and now we're going to get into some same steps, but now you're going to see one with decimals here. So 4.5 plus parentheses negative 5.5. Okay, so again, two signs next to each other, we got to change that. And when there's one negative, it'll stay negative, or as a minus, however you like to think of it. Okay, so now we have to think, are the signs same or different? They are actually different, because again, the one out in front does not have a sign, so we're going to think of it as positive. Okay, so negative and a positive. Since the signs are different, we subtract. 5.5 is bigger. 5.5 minus 4.5 will give you 1, or 1.0. which digit is bigger? The 5.5, so it'll be negative 1.0.